Hello everyone, welcome to this special practical series on charts in general medicine, in our wards, in our exams, and in real clinical practice. Charts are not just numbers on paper, they are silent stories, stories of physiology disturbed, stories of pathology unfolding, and sometimes stories of life threatening emergencies waiting to be recognized. Many students look at a chart and see confusion. A clinician looks at the same chart and sees patterns. That difference between confusion and clarity is exactly what this series is about. In this series, we will decode each chart step by step, not just what the values are, but why they matter and how to think logically, clinically, and confidently. We have a 45-year-old male presenting with generalized swelling of the body. In clinical terms, this is anasarca. When you see a patient with this degree of edema, your differential diagnosis narrows immediately. To pinpoint the cause, we look to the 24-hour urine report. Let's analyze the data. The volume is 1500 ml and the specific gravity is 1010. But the diagnostic gold lies in the biochemistry. Look at the albumin. 4 pluses noted as massive proteinuria. This is the hallmark of glomerular injury. Next, look at the microscopy. RBCs are nil, which rules out a nephritic picture. However, we see fatty casts. Why fatty casts? Because massive proteinuria leads to compensatory hyperlipidemia and that lipid spills into the urine. So we have generalized edema, massive proteinuria, fatty cast and absence of RBCs. Your provisional diagnosis is nephrotic syndrome. Now let's correlate this with the patient's physiology. The chart shows massive protein loss. This inevitably leads to hypoalbuminemia in the blood. The liver senses this low oncotic pressure and aggressively synthesizes proteins, but in the process, it overproduces lipids, causing hyperlipidemia. Remember the classic tetrad of nephrotic syndrome: massive proteinuria, that is more than 3.5 gram per day, hypoalbuminemia, that is less than 3 gram per deciliter, generalized edema, and hyperlipidemia. Clinically, also watch for complications. These patients are hypercoagulable due to the urinary loss of antithrombin 3 and they are immunocompromised due to the loss of immunoglobulins. Moving to management, we divide this into general and specific measures. General management focuses on symptom control. First of all, diet. Salt restriction to less than 2 grams per day to manage the edema. Then diuretics. Loop diuretics such as furosemide to promote fluid offloading. Then renoprotection. ACE inhibitors or ARBs are essential, not only for blood pressure control but also to reduce intraglomerular pressure and decrease proteinuria. And last but not the least, statins to control the hyperlipidemia. Specific management is determined by the underlying etiology, usually confirmed by a renal biopsy. The mainstay of treatment typically involves corticosteroids or other immunosuppressive agents to halt the glomerular inflammation. To summarize, when you see massive proteinuria with fatty casts and edema, think nephrotic syndrome immediately. Treat the swelling, protect the kidney with ACE inhibitors, and investigate the cause. Let's move to question number 2. A 30-year-old female presents with easy fatigability and generalized weakness. These symptoms are non-specific, but the chart tells the real story. Her hemoglobin is 5.3 gram per deciliter. This is severe anemia. The key question is not how low, but why. Let's classify the anemia. MCV 78 femtoliter, that is microcytic. MCH, that is 22 picogram, that means hypochromic. At first glance, this looks like iron deficiency anemia. But now look at the reticulocyte count, that is 7.5%. That is higher than the normal level. In iron deficiency, the marrow lacks raw material, so reticulocytes are low. Here the marrow is highly active. This points to hemolysis. So we have microcytic anemia and high reticulocyte count. This combination strongly suggests a hemoglobinopathy, most likely a thalassemia syndrome, possibly thalassemia intermedia, given her age and severity. Provisional diagnosis is hemolytic anemia, likely thalassemia. Suspicion is not enough. We need confirmation. Peripheral blood smear. Expect target cells, anisopoikilocytosis and possibly nucleated RBCs. Then hemoglobin electrophoresis or HPLC, that is the gold standard test. This identifies abnormal hemoglobin fractions. Then iron studies, especially ferritin, to rule out associated iron deficiency and assess iron overload. How do we manage a patient with hemoglobin 5.3 gram per deciliter and ongoing hemolysis? General management. First, packed red cell transfusion as she is symptomatic and severely anemic. Then folic acid supplementation 1 to 5 mg per day due to high marrow turnover. And also remember to avoid iron therapy unless deficiency is proven. Specific management. In thalassemia, monitor for iron overload. Chelation may be required. Splenectomy may be considered later in selected cases. Never interpret MCV in isolation. A high reticulocyte count means the marrow is active. Think hemolysis, not iron deficiency. Let's move to question number 3. A 55-year-old patient presents with a sudden severe headache described as a thunderclap headache accompanied by neck stiffness and vomiting. In emergency medicine, this triad is a vascular red flag. To confirm our suspicion, a lumbar puncture was performed. Let's analyze the CSF. The most critical finding is the appearance. The CSF is uniformly red with a yellow supernatant. This is xanthochromia. Why does this matter? In a traumatic tap, the CSF clears with successive tubes and the supernatant remains clear. Here the yellow color indicates breakdown of RBCs into bilirubin within the CSF, confirming a true hemorrhage. Supporting findings include raised opening pressure, numerous RBCs on microscopy, elevated protein due to blood, and normal sugar and chloride, ruling out meningitis. Provisional diagnosis is subarachnoid hemorrhage. Diagnosis made, but now we must identify the cause. Most spontaneous subarachnoid hemorrhage result from rupture of berry aneurysm. Key investigations include non-contrast CT of brain, usually the first test done before lumbar puncture to detect blood in the subarachnoid space, especially in the basal cisterns or sylvian fissure. CT angiography or digital subtraction angiography or DSA. This is the gold standard for identifying aneurysms. Management should be done immediately. These patients are at high risk of rebleeding and vasospasm. Medical management. Absolute bed rest. Head elevated at 30 degrees. Strict blood pressure control. Usually keeping systolic blood pressure below 160 mm of mercury. Nimodipine. Mandatory therapy to prevent cerebral vasospasm, typically occurring between days 3 and 14. Definitive management. Once the lesion is identified, neurosurgical intervention is planned. Surgical clipping or endovascular coiling depending on anatomy and expertise. Always remember, thunderclap headache plus xanthochromia equals subarachnoid hemorrhage until proven otherwise. This is a neurological emergency. Missing it can be fatal. A 28-year-old male presents with jaundice, fatigue, and right hypochondriac pain for 2 weeks. The site of pain points toward the liver, but the cause could be viral, toxic, or obstructive. Let's start with the liver enzymes. ALT is 360, AST is 324, while ALP is 142. This pattern, markedly raised transaminases with relatively normal ALP, is classic for hepatocellular jaundice, not obstruction. Now we come to the decisive section, the viral serology. HBs antigen positive, that means hepatitis B infection is present. IgM anti-HBC positive. IgM always means acute or recent infection. HBe antigen positive, that means active viral replication, and that also denotes high infectivity. But there's an important warning sign. Look at the prothrombin time, 17 seconds with a control of 13 seconds. This tells us the liver's synthetic function is beginning to fail. Diagnosis: acute viral hepatitis B with high infectivity and early synthetic dysfunction. Now we assess severity and risk. HBV-DNA quantitative PCR to measure viral load and guide further management. Hepatitis D virus screening. Co-infection or superinfection dramatically worsens prognosis. Then serial PT-INR monitoring. A rising INR signals progression toward acute liver failure. Management depends on severity. General management: supportive care including bed rest and hydration, high carbohydrate, low fat diet, strict avoidance of alcohol and hepatotoxic drugs, especially paracetamol. Specific management: antivirals are not routinely indicated in uncomplicated acute hepatitis B. They are considered only if there is severe coagulopathy or encephalopathy. Public health measures: all close and sexual contacts must be screened and vaccinated immediately. Remember this triad. IgM means acute, HBe antigen means infectious, prolonged PT means danger. A 20-year-old male presents with fever, generalized weakness and gum bleeding for 2 weeks. This is a dangerous triad. When you see bleeding suggesting thrombocytopenia, fever suggesting infection, and weakness suggesting anemia, think beyond common infections. This constellation should immediately raise suspicion of bone marrow failure. Let's confirm that with the chart. Start with the total leukocyte count. The TLC is 38,000. This is leukocytosis. But the key question is, are these normal, functional white cells? Here is the decisive finding. Blast cells is 40%. Normal peripheral blood has 0 blasts. A blast percentage 20% or more than 20% in blood or bone marrow defines acute leukemia. This explains the entire presentation. Marrow infiltration by blasts suppresses normal hematopoiesis. Platelets are 70,000, causing gum bleeding. Hemoglobin is 9.1 gram per deciliter, causing weakness. Provisional diagnosis is acute leukemia. Now the next critical step, classification. Is this acute lymphoblastic leukemia or acute myeloid leukemia? The chart alone cannot tell us. Peripheral blood smear. We look for our rods, needle-shaped inclusions. Their presence confirms AML. Bone marrow aspiration and biopsy. Mandatory to assess blast percentage, cellularity, and obtain diagnostic samples. Flow cytometry. This is the gold standard. CD markers precisely differentiate AML from ALL. This is a hematological emergency. Treatment must not be delayed. Supportive management. Packed red cell transfusion for anemia. Platelet transfusion to control bleeding. Broad spectrum IV antibiotics immediately. Despite high TLC, the patient is functionally neutropenic. Aggressive IV hydration to prevent tumor lysis syndrome. Definitive management. Induction chemotherapy aimed at achieving remission. Typical regimens include 7+3 protocol, that is cytarabine plus daunorubicin for AML, vincristine and steroid-based protocols for ALL. Do not delay diagnosis or referral.